Right, okay. I'm going to kick off. So, look, welcome to Cloudy with a Chance of Dyslexia. I just really want to make sure we're ready for this. But today we have Jonathan, or actually AKA JK, yeah, who's one of my one of my old bosses, and he's going to actually introduce himself now in terms of a little bit about himself, what he's up to now, and really. Jonathan, you've had an extensive career, right? So in sales across various different regions and sectors. So if you could introduce yourself, but also share with us how your journey began, what inspired you to get into sales.
Yeah, I think I think John, thank you for the intro. I think the for me, I don't think a lot of people plan to go into sales. I think it's one of those kind of careers you sort of fall into a little bit, or certainly it wasn't anything that was on my kind of wish list when I was graduating from university. But in my first graduate job as a trainee, we actually went through a bit of a process internally using some psychometric testing. That's a good start, isn't it? Sorry for that. I'm sure you can cut that bit out. I'll start again. Yeah, so I didn't think when I first kind of started out, I don't think that many people choose sales, and certainly it wasn't one of the things on my kind of wish list as I was graduating. But when I was a graduate trainee in my first graduate job, we actually went through a process of trying to identify people who could potentially move into sales. So there was some kind of psychometric testing, and I kind of came out as somebody who they felt, according to their test, would be a kind of natural fit for sales. And that's where really, I kind of started my first sales job was in asset finance. And what really, I guess, kind of got me into it and what made me enjoy it was just the sheer diversity of people that you can talk to, particularly on the kind of client side. So, I've always kind of loved learning new stuff. I've always enjoyed reading, and I think the opportunity to really go out, visit a lot of clients, and I think particularly when you're in asset finance, you're kind of selling finance, and you have to know they can pay you back, right? So you end up with quite a good understanding of their overall business and cash flow and how different companies that you wouldn't normally know about actually make money. Uh, so that really for me I found super interesting. So for example, I kind of know stuff about live bird handling systems that I would never have known about. But I financed a deal for a company back in the day called Grampian Food Group, who are basically the UK's biggest producer of chickens for supermarkets. And you learn so much stuff from there, going around factories and just seeing how people and businesses operate. And that's really, I guess, what got me started. So yeah, and I've enjoyed it since, and that's what I enjoy. I enjoy people, basically.
That's actually interesting, JK, because I remember a couple of sales visits that I had that stuck out. One was the Walls Ice Cream factory up in Gloucestershire that I was an account manager for, which is fantastic, to the point of which I used to bring an ice bucket with me to go and when I went to see them to collect some magnums to take home. And, and the other one was, which was really exciting at the time, was the Benetton factory, which is where Michael Schumacher's like Formula One car was. And I went in. I actually didn't do very well there because I was selling at the time against HP, and I walked in. It was HP everywhere, and the brand, So, but the IT guy was really nice, and he gave me a full tour of the factory. Yeah, every component they made, and it was like, wow, okay. Didn't get the sale, didn't get much business. Sold a few graphics cards and things like that, but it was a nice journey. It was a nice journey.
Yeah, and you learn a lot, I think, don't you? And I think I remember being on a client meeting out in Dubai a few years ago with a company that was a client of LinkedIn's who basically make window exhibits for retail, right? So whenever you look at the exhibits in a shop, and I never really thought there was a kind of a business that did that. I just kind of, it wasn't one of the things that really entered my head. But this guy's got this great little company out in Dubai, and that's what they do. So, you get shown around, again, it's a shown around a factory story, isn't it? Which usually tends to be kind of stuff that you don't see as a normal consumer, and you're not really aware of all the kind of effort and work and thought process that goes on behind the scenes to something that you maybe take for granted in your actual life. So yeah, I think that's for me why I enjoy sales. You learn a lot. You learn a lot of stuff, pick up kind of useful and useless information throughout your life, which is all interesting to me. So.
So it's interesting because culture and sales and diversity and different sales approaches. So throughout your career, you've taken various different leadership roles, and I know one of them. How does that affect your strategies in terms of when you're trying to support a sales team, especially in a really diverse culture like in the UAE where you worked, right? So even the beginning of the conversation in selling in UAE, it's got to be different to the UK, right? So just interested to understand your approach and how you manage that when you were over there, because it must have been very different.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things you learn when you go to UAE is that inshallah can mean different things. And I remember I struggled with that, and people would say, "Yeah, well, we'll sign the order form, inshallah," and I'd go back and say, "Yeah, they're going to sign the order form," and then my boss would say, "What else did it say?" I said, "Oh, they said inshallah." Like, was it a good inshallah or a bad inshallah? It's like, I don't know. What does that mean? And eventually you learn that kind of inshallah can mean yes, and inshallah can also mean no, and you have to kind of understand the nuance of what else is going on. So yeah, there's a lot of differences, and obviously I think as well, certainly from like my team and people who worked with me out there, we had a lot of different nationalities, so a lot of very, very, I guess, strong diversity, more from a nationality perspective and gender perspective rather than maybe a neurodiverse perspective that kind of hadn't come up necessarily. I think a couple of things in terms of like managing a team like that and keeping that kind of diversity. For me, there's a few things, and I was thinking about this. Really, it's about understanding those individuals, right? All those individuals have got individual needs, individual aspirations. Some of them, are more focused on kind of what they can earn. Some are more focused on, how you can help make them look good. But what kind of I've tried to do is create, an element of kind of consistency from my approach. And I think, I was being kind of called out on this before I really knew what it was, is the kind of servant leader. I think one of the things that I enjoy about selling is not just the opportunity to meet clients and learn about lots of stuff that you might not, know about in your day-to-day life, but also really to help people be successful. And before I became officially a kind of sales leader, it's one of the joys I had in jobs I'd had previously. Remember you talk about kind of like going and not getting a deal. I remember long, long time ago I worked in recruitment, and I remember interviewing a girl for a graduate trainee job in tech sales and actually advising her against going forward for it. And she found that a bit weird. And I said, "Look, you're going to hate this. Don't do it." And I advised her to go and do something else, which I could tell was a kind of passion of hers. And that girl actually, 6 months later, I was in London back in the days when I would be going out late at night in London, some sort of club. And this girl actually was walking the other side of the street, and she crossed the street to stop me and say thank you because she recognised me as a person who'd given her that advice. And I think that's really cool. Now, obviously at the time I didn't get a fee from her, right? So it's not beneficial financially, but that was something that really stuck with me, and I think that's what I try and bring to my team. The the first, I would say, really good boss that I worked with was somebody who I felt was really on my side. We were a partnership, and he supported me. He got me a pay rise without me asking for one. Right, that's always quite nice. Yeah. So I think it's that enjoyment of seeing people be successful. Creating that kind of partnership with them, but also holding them to a standard. Right, and we agree. What that standard is, what the expectations are, and if you have people in your team who want to be successful, and I think we can touch on this as well, is we as a team can help us both become more successful. So how do we do that? So it's not about managing, it's about coaching and developing and supporting people. And that, I think, is a philosophy that, if you have that as a core philosophy, then you can use that to almost everybody, but it will obviously be nuanced in terms of, the individual, their wants, desires, the stage they are in their kind of career cycle, the stage they are in the job. The way you support somebody is different if they're already a kind of master of their craft. Then you need to have different tools to work with them and keep them motivated and try and stretch them into something new than if it's somebody who's fairly new into a role who might need more direct type assistance.
I think what you've touched on there, JK, as well, is actually what is really important in those sort of diverse cultures as well, is the actual company culture as a business. Does that company culture is it just written on the wall, or does it decimate throughout the organization? And what I've found in organizations I've worked in is what's written on the wall doesn't decimate through the organization sometimes. Now, that's not a bad thing. It's just, your responsibility as a leader is to take what those things that are written on the wall and try and drive that, whatever, drive your own culture. And I think one thing you always did, JK, with working with you is you took all that was written on the wall, but you also had your, you dig in as a team, it was together as one. Yeah. And I really like that. So, just a bit of feedback. I thought your leadership was great. You probably wouldn't be on this call otherwise, JK, if I didn't. But yeah. So as sort of you experienced in LinkedIn and Pluralsight, and you've been at the forefront of selling technology-based solutions. How did you see sales evolving particularly in the tech industry and in emerging technologies? Like, how do you see things like AI and cloud coming in? Because we sort of look at technology helping a salesperson, but then there's also there's pluses and minuses in terms of those sales skills you're trying to develop, right? And I'd like to see your thoughts on that, and how you've seen that in other businesses you've worked in, how it's helped and how it hasn't. I mean, I love LinkedIn, by the way. I think LinkedIn's a great tool, to be honest.
It's a great tool, and obviously I spent 9 years there, so I'm still strong advocate for the platform and the business. I think touching back just before you go into that, just touching back on that kind of culture piece, I think that is really important. Certainly, LinkedIn was very, very strong in the culture, and it was used, I think, properly, if you see what I mean. So the words weren't just on the wall; they were kind of in meetings, in conversations as well. You could hold people accountable to the culture, but that was supported from the very, very top. And I think that's super important. I think as a kind of middle manager, it can be quite difficult to try and ingrain company culture if it's not widespread, supported from the top as well. So I would kind of stress that. But I think there can be nuances. One of the things at LinkedIn we always had was one of the sort of cultural tenets was about demanding excellence. And actually that then evolved to inspiring excellence, because the demanding excellence potentially leaves a little kind of route for, I expect you to work till 10 o'clock because that's excellence, which maybe isn't quite, the way it's meant to kind of come across, right? If I can inspire you to work till 10 o'clock and, do a bit extra, then that's a kind of different story. But in terms of, I suppose, your actual question and how, sales has changed from a technology perspective, I think there's two bits of that really. First of all, it's been, super helpful. And when I started out, we'd send things by fax, right? And obviously that is a very clunky mechanism compared to something like email, right? So, when you really go back and you look at, oh yeah. Guy Stuart Burnett, who worked for HSBC up in Scotland, he was like lightning. The guy answered the phone in about, and honestly, it didn't even ring. He was the first to pick. You couldn't beat him to the phone. There was no chance. Every call came in, he was on it first. Yeah, great sales guy as well, but somewhat kind of old school, right? But I think if you look at kind of how technology's helped us, and we'll talk a bit about cloud and that kind of stuff. I look at things like, we're all very familiar with something like Salesforce, right? But you think of a world before Salesforce, right, is an entirely different kind of environment. So those kind of things, those technology, and I think the way technology is moving should hopefully help salespeople. I think we'll touch on that a little bit, but also as well from the way it kind of, in a sense, hinders us, or we have to change our approach, because technology is also assisting the buyers. I think we can all see, and the research is showing that buyers are going a lot further down the sales cycle now before you or I would even know as salespeople that they're engaging with us. So there's also a lot of technology out there trying to help us to try and understand, who's investigating different words on platforms, etc. So we can start to gauge interest early. But I think that's something that hinders us in the older sales approach doesn't quite work, because you're only going to get, I think it was out of about 100. If a company spends like 100 hours doing research on a particular project where they're looking to buy some technology, only about 11 of those hours are actually spent with salespeople, right? And that's probably 3 or 4 different companies. So you've only maybe got 2 hours or 3 hours out of 100 hours that organization is spending. So you can't go into conversations now with that kind of old approach of, telling about your business, what's going on, what keeps you up at night, those kind of conversations. So that's, I think, how, we as sales professionals have to kind of evolve with that. And it does make our job, potentially more demanding. We've got to make impact in a much smaller time. But in terms of, different tools coming in, AI particularly, hopefully, um, and just other mechanisms for collating data for us and helping us should hopefully, I would look for it to take away a lot of the kind of more boring stuff we get involved with, and that's what I think is going to be would be super helpful, so that we can focus on the kind of stuff that we're getting paid to do. I often think going back, how much time salespeople spent on admin type tasks. It's like you're paying someone 200 grand a year to do admin. That doesn't make any sense to me, right? So the more that can be taken away. I don't know many salespeople who are good at admin, right? It's not usually their kind of natural state of play. So anything that can happen that kind of takes that away and allows us to kind of concentrate on the stuff that we're both good at and find enjoyable is, gets a big thumbs up from me.
Yeah, I mean, JK, I spent probably the last year playing with Chat GPT, and it's incredible the amount of paperwork it will take away. And the fact you can chat to it as well, you can set it up on your phone, you can set specific criteria that you're interested in, a process you're going through or you want to learn about something, and you can talk to it. I said you can sit in the bath and chat to it. It's got to that level where it's intelligent. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's yeah. I'll cut that bit maybe, maybe not. But you can use it very much down to your own persona. And this is where it really helps to, I suppose, take us on to the next conversation around, one of the common challenges in dyslexia is that ability to summarize quickly for a sales process. It just makes that so much easier. So it takes a lot of the challenges that people who have dyslexia away almost immediately overnight. Yeah, and it's just all these companies that are driving it, like with Made by Dyslexia and people like that are really sort of suggesting this is a new skill for the next century. I think they're bang on, and there's been a lot of research done recently around the recognition of this as a skill now, because a lot of what you do as a dyslexic person is you can see around corners, and that's why you find a lot of salespeople are dyslexic, and most of them won't say they're dyslexic, right? Because because it costs 700 quid to get diagnosed for a start, right? So there's a blocker there for anybody below a certain pyramid. Yeah, 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 exactly. So some of the things that I'm looking to do, my long-term goal really is to remove that barrier completely, because I don't think it needs to be there anymore. And actually, we can go on in terms of, how the workplace handles it today and how the workplace can handle it tomorrow. And I know how the workplace handles it today, and it's good. They're making strides, and it's about how you can start putting in things now that just makes it easier for you as a manager, right? And as a company to handle it, because I think sometimes it's like a slowdown for you. Oh, hang on, we've got to handle this guy, right? So what we want to try and do is say, actually, you don't need to worry about it. There's things in place now. It's no longer a barrier. Yeah, it's just actually a positive, because this guy can do this, this, and this. Whereas, so yeah, I'd like to get your view on that anyway, JK. So, in terms of, I think your awareness of the topic to some extent.
Yeah, okay, John. And I think it's really interesting you talk about people don't mention it much, right? And I think there is um, I don't think so much nowadays. I think maybe, historically there'd have been a bit of a stigma and people would have kind of tried and kept quiet about anything like that, or maybe wouldn't have known they had it, right? Um, there is a kind of I think you go back 40 years, they wouldn't have thought John was dyslexic. They might have just thought he wasn't very good at English at school, right? And that was, it's um, I guess thankfully the world has changed. People are more kind of cognizant of the fact that we talk about diversity, and generically we're talking about ethnic diversity, gender diversity, but also there's increasingly more conversations about neurodiversity as well, right? And why it's advantageous to have a diverse team because you get diverse thoughts. There's no point in having all the same people. I remember that being pushed at LinkedIn when Mike Gamson was CRO there. He was a great leader, and he said at one point, I sat around the room and realised I was with a bunch of 45-year-old white guys, and this can't be our business is not that, our clients are not that. So how do we, we have to think of that from a leadership perspective. If we're not replicating that at the very top table, then how do we expect our people to replicate that across the business? And we want that diversity of thought. I think for me, the kind of dyslexia thing particularly was very kind of hot topic when I worked at SHL, because SHL's primary business was psychometric testing, right? So, we'd be running programs for big blue chip companies for their graduate entries, and clearly they would have people coming to them who had, various neurodiversity kind of challenges, dyslexia being a key one. So, as one of our kind of duties as salespeople, and it wasn't one we enjoyed, was being the duty consultant. So we'd have to kind of like man the hot phone as people would call in and go, right, I've got this issue, I've got someone with dyspraxia. What adjustments do I need to make to help give them, a level playing field against other candidates who are coming through the process? And and that was obviously super important, and very good thing to have that. What I then kind of was never really aware of is how, as a leader in the business, do you then take that on, right? And I do think actually organizations have always had this. They're not very good at learning a lot of stuff through interview process and then actually applying it when someone joins the company. If you think about when you go through the interview process, there's okay, so we know that John's got dyslexia, he's good at this, he's not so good at that, here's development areas, this is what we work on. But does that actually land on a manager's desk? Or do we just kind of come in there on day one and go, right, let's kick on and treat John like we treat everybody else, and then 6 months later say, oh, well, this isn't really working out, what do we do differently? And it's possibly information you maybe knew before you even started, right? So I do think this kind of the dyslexia piece, particularly for yourself, is how is your business aware of it, and are they actually doing anything to make sure they are supporting you or people in that type of situation within that? And are they educating sales leaders? Are they educating people like me to say, right, actually, you know what, John's in your team, he's dyslexic. This is what it means for John, and this is what it means for you in terms of the way, the allowances you might have to make. Now, okay, we hope that Chat GTP and various technologies can go, you don't have to worry about it. But in reality, if I'm not trained and I don't understand how to deal with that, then what I do I just treat it the same as everyone else, right? So I think that for me is really important from an education perspective. Is it's all very well, you being able to say, right, I have this, and you can tell me, but how am I being supported by the business, broadly speaking, to be educated to know how to actually help you with that, and know you've got it in the first place, right? Because you see, if you keep it quiet, if I don't know you've got it, or any other issue anyone else might have, then potentially I'm going to get frustrated because you're working in a different way, and it doesn't necessarily meet the expectations that I've got.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the market and how it's perceived, and perception and reality are always two different things, as you know, JK. I'll give you an example. My daughter she got a first class honours degree, but they found out that she was dyslexic because when she was in her first year of doing a degree, and they helped her. Yeah. And we didn't recognize it. Actually, we should have known, because I never really talked about my dyslexia until now. Yeah. And I just thought, no, I'll just get on with it. I just worked harder. Everything, that was the answer. When I grew up, just work harder. That's what you need to do. And so, you just got on with it. So as my daughter, though, she went on, she got her first honours degree. She went off, taught in schools and things like that. And she was wanting to travel. Yeah. And so she had to fill out she did a TEFL so she could do online teaching. Anyway, she went to one of these TEFL companies, and she had to do I think it was a grammar or some sort of test. Anyway, she did the test, and they went, "Oh, you failed." And she went, "Hang on, I'm a first class honors. I've got all this. Hang on, can I just retake it?" It was like, "No, you have to wait 6 months." So I'm thinking, hang on. So they didn't recognize, and they're in the teaching field, yeah, and they didn't recognize this. There's still challenges out there, even in teaching, yeah, where teaching, people aren't getting support that they need. So the more that you can build it into technology, yeah, the more it becomes democratized. So it doesn't have to lean on you, JK. It doesn't have to be. You just know, oh yeah, that person thinks differently. Yeah, and they think differently. No longer text is an issue. Whether the reading and writing thing actually is a bit of it's a misnomer. We don't read slower, or it just means it's more exhausting over time to read lots and lots and lots of context. Yeah, So if you're a read heavy business where there's a lot of content to read, that's fine. We've got loads of tools to do that. It can be read out. I can read it out. I can listen to it on audio. I can watch videos. There's loads of ways to coping with that. And if you're dyslexic, you overcome that. So it's no problem. Learning is not a problem for somebody's dyslexic. It's not really a learning difficulty. It's just, a little bit more in terms of how you take your information and you send it to another person. So when I send an email, you might notice that I've missed a word out. Right now, that wasn't intended. Yeah, but what I can do now, I've got all these tools, and you'll think, oh, that's a bit rude. He hasn't even checked it. Well, I've checked it with all the tools, but my visualization might have not caught that thing. Yeah, and you'd see it straight away.
So yeah, so couple things, John. Is first of all, that piece is what I mean about, I guess, other people in the business, your manager, whoever, understanding that. So we don't look at this word thing. Oh, the guy can't write an email. What's he doing with his clients? Kind of scenario, and start to question ability, right? So that's kind of the first piece. The second piece is on your daughter's one. The not they should be asking that kind of question first of all. If you're running those kind of assessments, you should be asking if people need allowances. It's one of the I this is going back quite a long time. 15 years ago, whatever it is, was trained with the British Psychological Society, and level A training teaches you how to run ability tests, such as verbal reasoning tests, right? And one of the things it teaches you is to make sure you're making allowances for people who need allowances for that kind of stuff.
Well, it's interesting. That's interesting too, JK. So I'll give you another perspective, right? I never use allowances, right? Never have, no, never will. And there's a reason for it, because I want to be on the same level as somebody else, right? So even though I could go that route, it's a painful route for me, because I was 15 when I was diagnosed, right? So 15 years old, and it was like a no. You don't mention it. This is not something you talk about. You get 5 minutes in GCSEs, you're done. That's 5 minutes extra to check your your spelling, things like that. That was it. So that's fine. That's fine. That was the way it was. And just never brought it up at interview, because immediately the mindset at the time would have been, well, you can't read and write, or you can't spell, or you can't do anything. Just took me a bit longer. I just worked harder than everybody else, and I hoped to make phone calls and talk to people more. You know.
Good. That's what people should be doing. It's not, a sales job. I like that, right? It's not just about sending out 1,000 emails, is it? So
Exactly. So in your current what you're doing now, JCAD, sort of in terms of your sort of building and execution plans. I'm just interested to know what you're doing now, anyway. And I know you're working in a new role now. So sort of how you're finding that? Is it?
yeah, it's an interesting one. So I managed to get some time off last year, which was nice. I was hoping to improve my golf, which I did a little bit, but not as much as I would have liked. I think trying to change a 13-year-old. Well, I'm under 15 handicap now, John, so that's good. But by the end of this year, I want to try and get down to. I want to shoot a 70 something. That's my aim. I might have to go and play an easier course to make it happen, but we'll see. We'll see. It's getting better, but I think when you've had a kind of like a rubbish swing ingrained over 30 years, it takes quite a lot of changing, and it does kind of revert back to it, and then you end up with this horrible sort of mishmash. But yeah, it's been fun. So yeah, what I'm up to just now. My wife has her own business. She's an exec coach, so she works with kind of CEO and top teams to help them deliver kind of cultural change programs, kind of some of the stuff we've been talking around, particularly around things like psychological safety and really trying to create, I guess, high performing teams, which is we've talked about before, requires good communication between individuals in those teams, right, and not mentioning that you're dyslexic, for example, right, would be a bad example of that. And so what I've done is kind of officially join her and our colleagues. It's only a part-time role. It should be quite interesting to kind of sales manage my wife and our friends. Should be fun. I think it won't be a kind of standard sales management approach, a little bit more delicate potentially. And but yeah, she's got this great little business called Collaboration Equation. They've done a lot of great work, and I think I'm probably allowed to say that they're not the most natural salespeople. Probably, I think, as a lot of kind of consultants, they really enjoy doing the work. They're a bit less inclined to kind of ask for business, and they don't really know kind of what sales is. So it's really early days. We're just starting to kind of shape, okay, what would the go-to-market look like? What's your ideal customer? How do you identify them? How are you going to go and find them? What does your network look like? And really try and create, I suppose, a sort of sales workflow. And, it's not going to be, we're not going to be using AI to generate thousands of emails just yet. That might be later on down the road, as they start to grow the business. But I think it's something that for me is kind of useful from a couple of different perspectives. So I think, first of all, I'll give you an example. Right? One of the jobs I looked at that I didn't get fairly recently, and the eventual reason was it was a very, very small kind of startup, sub $10 million ARR US business. And it's, well, you've not really worked in an organization of this kind of size before. So I thought, okay, well, I can work in one much smaller, and let's see what we learn from that. So, that's kind of part of it. And I just think it's going to be interesting to, I will learn a lot of stuff from working with, a very, very small business where you are actually shaping go to market, as a small team of like 3 or 4 of us trying to make it happen and trying to grow that, and maybe bringing in pieces of technology. Whereas I guess where I've worked beforehand, you've always kind of got what you've been given from a technology perspective. So that's going to be really, really interesting. And obviously, if we can make it work, then it'll build a business that hopefully will eventually allow us to have wider teams operating, and it's a kind of broader consultancy business that allows us to earn money when we're playing golf, fundamentally. So I think twofold. There's a personal objective there, to support the kind of family finances from one piece, but also from a learning opportunity, I think is going to be really, really interesting. But yeah, it's like, a weekend, so it's still very early days.
Yeah. Build the car. I mean, I try and vision a business. I suppose I try and use a car, right? So if you build the car, right, and you build it from scratch, it's going to be really challenging, right? But you use components that are already out there, and you put them in, and you've already got your construct of how a successful sales team can be built, right? So you've already done that historically, haven't you? So and I guess what you want to build the business to the point where you just throw the keys back to somebody to you can run that now. That's perfect. You can't mess that up. Yeah,
I think kind of like, well, some of these kind of programs that the team would run is very much, we talked about this from a kind of culture change perspective, right? If you want to create business culture, it has to work from the top down. Yeah. And so, Lucy and the team are really, really experienced exec coaches, and they would very much kind of work with, CEO or, European business leader kind of thing, think of kind of US tech firm, for example, to help kind of create that kind of culture sort of them and their team. But obviously, you then want to take that down to the kind of next level, right? And that's not the kind of stuff they're necessarily as interested in. It doesn't require the level of experience and skill set they've got, but obviously then they can build a wider team that can go and deliver those type of programs. And that's really that's the vision of where we see that business kind of going to. First of all, we need more clients, right? And of course, the trouble is that when they're busy delivering, they're not busy trying to get more clients. So, like any kind of small consultancy, they have these sudden periods where they're not busy, so they can go and do a bit of selling, and then they get busy again, so they stop, right? So, how do we create that consistency of process, and how do we make sure that they wouldn't know what a pipeline was if it hit them on the head, right? So, that's one of the things to start getting into is what does a good sales pipeline look like, John? And as you and I know, you need more than one deal before you start forecasting, right? So, how can we generate that type of mindset as well, and really support them in that, because it's not something they're really familiar with. They're great at doing the work they do, and they can sell it because they're good at it, but they need a process, and that's really where I'm going to be helping them with is trying to understand that. I'm trying to make sure that I think one of the key things is, and you and I again would know this when it comes to kind of sales, is how much time you can waste, right? So I was thinking, what is when you talked about kind of building go to market and building strategy and that type of thing, it's really about focus. It's about how the one constraint we've all got is how many hours in the day there are, and how can you make sure each of those hours is productive and you're wasting as few of them as possible, and that's going to help the team, and I'll enjoy working with them to kind of create that structure.
So in terms of your vision, and I really really like that as well, because I had my last chat actually was a guy called Dave Chapman, and he was talking about his the importance of his coach when he was at BP, and the coach coming in and giving the team some advice on an approach that they should take for massive complexity when you get these very complex cycles of everybody's trying to do everything, but then it ends up being a disaster because everybody's trying to do everything, but then it just gets complexity over complexity to the point of which everybody gets all very stressed, right? So the stress levels go through the roof, running out of money, running out of time, we're not going to meet our objectives, etc., etc. So this is how I imagine your wife steps in and calms the situation down, puts in a set of process. But again, it's like I think coaching at all levels now is becoming probably more important than ever. I think because we've got this whole big generational change with multiple different generations in the workforce still, yeah. And I think having a coach that understands all those different layers and has understood the impact on those different layers and those different generations is an enormous benefit, I think. And I think supporting the younger generation coming through into the workforce is critical. So it's
Yeah, I think in a sense, I challenge you a little bit on that, John, because I think what you're kind of describing somewhat is maybe more kind of like a mentoring type, consultancy type approach. Whereas I think if you look at where coaches would support is more about enabling you, right? So if I take it, and this is nothing like the kind of level that Lucy and her colleagues operate at, right? But one of the things I've always really, really tried to do, and it's possibly because my wife is a coach, right, is to take a coaching approach to sales management.
does she coach you then, JK?
Oh, I try and stop her, mate. Sometimes, it's she's realised, of course, that actually, I don't really enjoy her coaching me, but then she doesn't enjoy me sales managing her. So that's been quite entertaining. She's like, I see what you mean now. You're like, right, okay. It kind of works both ways, right?
So you got the close. You closed her.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but I think so for me, the thing about coaching is about enabling people, right, to come up with answers themselves. Because often, and it does depend. They always say, don't coach somebody out of a burning building, right? Just tell them to get out, and there's the exit. Yeah. Um, but when you're dealing with salespeople, for me, there's this. It's the old, you give a man a fish or teach a man or teach them to actually fish themselves, right? If you think about it from a sales manager perspective, one of the things I would do is if you came to me with a problem, I would always try and get you to come up with a solution rather than me tell you the answer, right? If I tell you the answer, you're just going to keep coming back and asking me, yeah. If I get you to get to the answer yourself, then you'll remember it and you'll be able to go and apply it. And I think, you know, that for me is the name to take that thought process. So certainly from my level, again, we'd use the GROW model, right? Goal, reality, options, will. So what are you trying to achieve? Where are you currently at? What are the different options? And now what are you going to do? But coaching from a sales leadership perspective is not always signposted. And it was always one of the challenges we had at LinkedIn was people would say, oh, we were never coached. And it's like, well, you're getting coached every day. Because when you come to me and say, JK, what shall I do about this? And I turn around and go, well, what do you think you should do? And then you go, well, I think I should phone this guy because he's involved and he knows them. He can maybe give them an insight. And go, okay, great, go and do that. That's coaching, right? It's just a micro level. It's not a signposted. We have a 1 hour, every 2 weeks for coaching. That's not what it's about. It's more about a mindset. And one of the things that I've tried to do, and it's kind of a bit easier in the office, and there's that level of kind of communication that is when you're remote, and that's maybe one of the challenges we haven't kind of touched on in terms of building a kind of sales culture when everyone sits at home. Is to encourage other people to do that as well. So it's ask, don't tell, right? Ask the question, don't just give somebody the answer. Now, sometimes you need to because they might just not know, right? But if you get people to learn themselves, then they'll remember it and they'll become better. And as a sales manager, your job becomes easier because you're not just answering questions all the time. You're enabling your team to deal with it themselves.
There's a couple of books I look back at, JK, and one I've always go back to and open up again and again because I'm never there with it. Is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's such a great framework to keep reminding yourself of and going back and sort of going sharpen the saw, or it's something I'll put it at the footnote of this. Absolutely one that I'd recommend for any salesperson, even though people go to sales books. In terms of creating your own personal culture and driving yourself forward, that's just a great book to have a framework. Have you ever come across it, JK? I don't know whether you. I just like it as a book myself, but
Yeah, so yeah, years ago, I haven't looked at it recently. Um, But there's a lot of the what was the one? I'm terrible for remembering names of books. It's probably not one that's behind me now. The one that you talked about the kind of micro habits.
Oh yeah, yeah. Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's exceptional book. Yeah, little tiny micro changes every day. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a 1% improvement, and it goes back to, I think it was Adrian Moorhouse who runs. He had his kind of lane four, who talked about kind of improvements, and he said, "I want to win a gold medal," and they go, "Well, you need to be 4 seconds faster. You're miles off a gold medal." And he's like, "Well, I've got 4 years. It's 1 second a year, right? You break it down. Surely that's achievable, right?" And that's the thing. One of the things to talk about is what makes great salespeople or great business people. Full stop. Are people who are looking at kind of how can they just do little things better all the time that are going to make them a bit more effective as a human being. What do you want to be, and what is that? And that's the atomic habits, isn't it? Is what do you want to be, and is the thing you're doing making you be that person? I want to be someone who's fit and healthy. Right? When do you last go to the gym? Okay. Does that say you're that sort of person? Right?
You're absolutely right. Identity is such a large part of it. When you pick your identity, like JK, you want to be a golfer, and you've already said, like, I want to be playing scratch, right? Now that is now you are a golfer.
No, that's that's thinking of.
But you are a golfer now, and so what Atomic Habits talks about is visualizing the person you want to be. And so I want to be a great golfer, and when I speak to people, when I talk to people, I'm going to tell them I'm a golfer, and they're going to say, "How good are you?" Right? Well, I'm 15 handicap, which is I think I think you've done very well, JK. So I think you're being hard on yourself, but that's me, because my golf is probably.
It's gone up a bit over the winter, John. Dodgy conditions in the winter. It'll come down in the summer.
Yeah, but it's every day then, with being a golfer, right? If I spend 15 minutes getting better every day, even if it's just a putt or it's this or that, that it's a multiplier. It's a multiplier every day. I get slightly better every day. It's when people don't practice. When, like me, when I turn up on the tee and I say, "Yeah, I haven't played since last August," it's probably true.
Yeah, and it's not really pretty, is it? So
So look, this has been really nice, JK, and I just wanted to say I really appreciate you coming on. It's really been insightful. Learn about. I personally, my story to you really is when I was working on that significant wealth management deal. I've just sort of thought back of how you coached me through that deal now, because it's strange when you're there, you don't notice it because it's so subtle the way you coach. But I realize now that I couldn't have done it without your coaching. But I couldn't quite put my finger on it until you raised that. Now I'm thinking, yeah, JK saw me through that, because you were there every day going, "Yeah, we need to get on top of this, John." And like it was like coach, 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 coach. Where are we getting to? And it was yeah. And really, sales is a team sport, isn't it? Right? You have to use all your audience and all the people in your organization, and you need to understand their organization better than they do if you really want to get the big ones. And that was a great one to win.
100%. Yeah, you're absolutely right on the team sport piece. I think there's a couple of things actually, just to kind of before we finish. It's funny you say about you didn't notice the coaching. One of the things we had at LinkedIn was we kept doing these like quarterly kind of employee surveys, and it always came up going, "We're not being coached, we're not being coached." And as his managers going, "We're coaching these guys all the time." And eventually HR said, "You have to signpost it." You literally, so someone would say, "What do you think I should do? I've got this deal." And we go, "Okay, well, what options have you got? Where are you trying to get to?" And they'd answer it all, and they get to the end of it, and they go, "Right, I'm going to go and do this." And you go, "By the way, that was coaching." I'm like, "Oh, was it?" "Yes. Yes, it was." So next time you get asked in the quality survey, put down you've been coached, because I'm getting into trouble here because apparently we're not coaching you. And it's only because, as you say, you're being, it feels like a conversation. And I remember being trained, this is a long time ago, in interviewing people. And one of my colleagues, I was quite new, I worked at Michael Page a long, long time ago. One of my colleagues at the time said that he said, "JK is the best interviewer we've got." And I asked him, "Well, how?" He goes, "Because he gets everything, but it just sounds like a conversation. He doesn't just sit there and go through the checklist of kind of standard questions. You cover them all. You've got your little sheet. We had in the old days, an actual bit of paper. Everything would be answered, but it felt like a conversation." And I think that's what good coaching is. It doesn't feel like you're being coached. It just feels like because it's empowering you. You're the one who's coming up with the answer. You own the answer because you've come up with the answer. It's not, "I've told you, go and call this guy or go and email that person or whatever else it might be. You own it, so you go and do it. So yeah, it's not just about actually learning something. Like I said earlier, it's about you owning the outcome and owning the next steps.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you've just got that. Yeah, you've got that natural empathy, JK, and that you can't buy that. You know, that just comes with the person you are. I don't think you could probably coach it to some extent, but I think empathy is how you brought up as a child, how you're maybe even coached as how parents look after you, and manage you. Builds that into you, and I think you know. I think it shows that you've come from a family that has been, you know, sort of that I suppose that sibling rivalry probably helped as well, didn't it, between your brothers and things like that over the years.
Oh, it does. All little brothers. I'm still the big brother, so well, that's less advantageous as you get older, obviously. So, but yeah, I think that's one of the things we talk about, kind of what and what makes a good salesperson, right, or what helps. And I think a natural curiosity is something that helps. A kind of there's a natural empathy to actually caring about what the person on the other side of the table or sitting next to you wants to try and do, and how you can help them do that. And that applies to people in your team or to clients, right? Because ultimately, if you think about it, if a client is buying something from us, that's still a human being making a decision, right? And there's going to be some risk attached to them as an individual. And so, you as a salesperson are beholden to help them, right? And that would certainly be my view. I know there's a lot out there who'd go, take the money and run. Not, but I've, never done that, and I would hope that none of my clients would ever think I'd done that, because I don't believe that's just the right thing to do, fundamentally. So maybe it's just part of my own values, which say that I want to help. I can help people. I can help my clients, and I can help people in my team, and that makes the world a better place and makes me feel good about myself. So it's a bit selfish from that perspective. But that's one of the things you'd want to see if you're looking at, who, if I'm looking at hiring a salesperson, right? What are the kind of things, and what are the things I would look for? And I've seen people who have these kind of traits be successful. One of them really is the ability to be coached, right? Is to be self-aware enough to think that, to realize they're not always right. Um, that willingness to seek feedback, proactively seek feedback, actually. Because not all managers will be great at giving you it. Giving feedback is not an easy thing to do, particularly negative feedback, right? A lot of people just go, well, that's a bit of an awkward conversation. Let's not bother, right? Because it's a bit difficult. So, you have to learn as a manager to have difficult conversations with people. It's not always easy. But I think, if you've got that willingness to seek feedback, that drive and effort that you talked about, and then I would think the one other thing I've found that really sets out great salespeople is planning, actually. And I remember again at SHL, we looked at some analytics around OPQ, which is 32 dimensions of personality, and we linked that to sales performance. And out of those 32 dimensions, one of them, planning and organizing, was the most powerful in terms of personality traits that go into sales. And I've seen that with people who are just on top of their stuff. That makes sense, yeah? So they come to meetings prepped, they come to meetings on time. When they go into client meetings, they've done silly little things, John. Like it's a bit sales 101, right? But one of the things I've always tried to know is, okay, if we've got a client meeting, right, and it's an important meeting all the time, we do a dry run. And we don't do the dry run in the morning, we do the dry run 2 days beforehand, because if something's wrong, we need time to fix it, right? After we've had the meeting, we do a review, put it in the diary. Yeah. But if you don't put it in the diary, it doesn't happen. Again, before I even was at SHL, I worked for a company called TMI, a time manager. They used to compete with Filofax back in the day, right? It's all about managing your time. And one of the things they would talk about is put stuff in there. Yeah. Put lunch in your diary, because otherwise, if you've got to do prep for a meeting, put it in the diary. Have it in there so you can see. Because what happens is stuff happens that stops you if it's not actually there. And that for me is really important. I've seen so many times salespeople go into meetings late, underprepared, and it's sales 101, right? You're not going to succeed if you're not organized. So yeah, those three things really at a very key level is, be organized. I'm not naturally an organized person. I did the same as you. I just threw time at the problem. You know, you get into the office at 7 o'clock in the morning. You've got 2 hours to get organized before the phones start going. Or Stuart always answered them. Obviously, I didn't have to do that because I had my other sales colleague who's a receptionist. But yeah, that's you. You deal with it.
on the organisation, I've been prepping for an interview, and I've got a spreadsheet open that is basically worked out my 30, 60, 90-day plan for when I start. I've worked out everything like I need to get going, and I haven't got the job yet, right? But the thing is, my mindset is all ready to go, and I think it's important when you're going for something that you consider all these factors, because when you start, the gun goes off. If you're not prepared, you're not going to get anywhere, are you? So, my attitude towards preparation is always be prepared for, and then even if you don't get everything, you've got some of it done, right? You've got some of that work done, and you've started that process. So, and it gives you the right mindset as well for success, right? So look, JK, I'm checking the time. Are you still good? Because we're 51 minutes in. Are you still?
So good, mate, yeah. I'm just, and talk of that kind of 30, 60, or 90. I remember asking that question in an interview to a girl I hired in Dubai called Laura. And I said, okay, what would, if you did a 30, 60, 90, what kind of stuff would you put on it? And she actually brought it out and said, I've done one, here it is. And I was like, okay, that says to me somebody who's on top of their stuff. And she was, she was. And she was great, really, really successful because she was always on top of her stuff. It's kind of one of the core things that you can learn that, right? That is something you can learn. If it's not your natural, years ago, a sales director said to me, "Look, there's two types of salespeople. The salespeople who do it through, personality, charisma, just people want to buy from them, they care about their clients, they help them, that type of stuff. And there's people who are super organized." And just make sure they do the follow up within 24 hours before the interest curve starts to dip, that type of thing. And he said to me, he said, you're one of the former. He said, and you can't teach that, but you can teach the organization. You can learn that kind of stuff, right? So you can be super effective even if you don't have the whatever people would call it kind of natural, you know, stuff from your parents or your school times or whatever it is to have that natural kind of gregariousness or whatever it is. People would say it would kind of make a natural salesperson, which probably isn't even true anyway these days, right? So
Can do that for you now, JK. We're getting to an era where the organisation, honestly, this, but it's really strange. But the organisational side now, and this isn't going to happen immediately, right? It's not going to happen immediately, but you can see what, from watching what's happened with OpenAI and Microsoft's involvement and what they've done. It's incredible, really. They've integrated very, very quickly into Office 365, and so you can do things twice as fast, so much quicker than you could do in the past. They just and even look at Adobe as well, because I've been using Adobe for some of this stuff as well. It's just the speed of which you can do things. You can create a video. I did some little videos as well with AI just to cover the points we covered. So I'll do the same with this video. Covered some of those areas that we covered with little video as a subnote video so that people can, they can learn from it. So there's an educational side here as well, to trying to help young leaders or young sales guys to sort of pick up some points from listening to this podcast, right? So whether they get it on Spotify or they get it on, through the video version, you're more than welcome to consume it any way you want. But the whole idea is we're trying to help. Yeah, we're trying to help out young leaders and young teams, and even older ones like me. I think I've learned something from this as well, probably to be a bit more organized.
we're all still learning, John. That's the point, right? Once you give up that, then it's time to retire and really focus on the golf, So golf and gardening, eventually, right?
I don't genuinely. I'm going to annoy you for a lot longer. I don't plan to retire too early, right, JK? So I'm going to might drag you into another podcast, get you along, JK.
Yeah, fantastic, mate. No, I mean, you talked about what I'm up to, right? So obviously, I'm doing this stuff with Lucy and our colleagues, collaboration equation, which is great. But I am still very open to my next kind of proper job. So I'm out there looking around and seeing what's out, and hopefully something will get going on that front fairly shortly as well.
Yeah, wish you the best. Wish you the best, JK. Well, look, thanks very much for coming on and talk and getting your perspective on things and the world. It's been really enlightening, and I look forward to catching up with you again on a personal level, JK, and wish you the best with you and your family as well. And hopefully we'll catch up face to face in March sometimes. I think we put in a diary, maybe, possibly on the golf course. I'll send you something because my son's got membership of a golf, not membership. He's joining as an employee a golf course in Kent. So maybe I think it's a difficult one though, JK. So you might have to have some adjustment to your handicap. I'll have to see how that goes.
Well, the system does that now, mate. Naturally, you see, there is a system now. So every course has a slope score, and so your handicap adjusts based on the slope score to the difficulty of the course you're playing. So it should all be fine. So there you go. I wasn't aware. It's absolutely brilliant. Yeah. So you go on a really easy course, your handicap drops down. You go on a hard course, your handicap jumps up. That's a fantastic system, actually. So yeah, it's cool. So we'll do that. I'll look forward to it.